Today we're going to talk about how to install a A4988 on the SKR Pro version 1.1. So I need to review a couple of things for you. First of all, this is our X stepper, our Y stepper, our Z stepper, and notice how there's two ports for the steppers for the NEMA17s. Then we have E0, E1, and E2, which would be our three steppers for our extruders. So in order to set this up, one of the things we first need to do is actually prepare the jumpers. So I'll first need to talk about the actual steppers and where the pin alignments are before I actually do that. So I'll show you that now. First, the underside of this board, you can see that we have our X stepper right over here, our Y, Z, E0, E1, and E2. What we're interested in knowing is where the enable pin would be located. And as you can see over here, it's in the upper right hand corner when it's flipped over. When it's the other way around, it's obviously going to be on the other side. That's important so that you don't damage your board and you know where you're connecting. There's also a direction pin and then a ground pin. Now that's going to be the same for all of the steppers. Now that we know the enable pin is located right here for the X stepper, here for the Y stepper, here for the Z stepper, here for the E0 stepper, here for E1, and here for E2. We know how to configure it for the correct pin. What we need to do now is actually prepare the jumpers. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the jumpers for the X. All these steppers are actually used for some other stepper driver, being, I believe, UART off the top of my head. So I'm going to take these out. Actually, it's not UART, it's SPI. Pardon me for that. And then in order to actually do the pins, we need to research that real quick in the documentation. So in the documentation for the SKR Pro, which I'll leave a link for in the description, you can see that there's a 3-volt rail. Then there's MS3, 2, and 1. And it says, set the jumpers according to your micro-stepping settings. Note, the high level is connected to the above 2-row pins, and the low level is connected to the following 2-row pins. So they're saying that these are the high for these two sets of pins, which would be located here. And the low would be this and this, which is over here. Now they also go into a little bit more detail down here of what you need to do for the reset pin. So what you need to know right here is it says if you want to use an A4988 or a DRV8825 driver, it is necessary to short the two pins shown in the pink square with a jumper. If you're not using an A4988 or a DRV8825, the jumper needs to be removed. So I'll show you how to do that now. So now that we know where those are going to be actually jumped, we're going to do the low pin right here for the reset jumper. And we're going to do it also on our Y stepper drivers as well. So I'm going to pop these out as well. And we're going to jump the other reset right here. So now that we have that done, we need to set up the actual stepper driver. And because we're doing the maximum degree of step being 1/16 of a step for the A4988, I'm going to jump this one, this one, and finally, I'm going to jump the last set of pins over here. Now it looks like I'm not aligned on one of these jumpers, so I'm going to pop it up for a second and take a look. And apparently that is jumped. So I'm going to do the same for the Y set of driver right here. So this is actually MS3, 2, and 1, I believe. I may have it backwards, but that's okay because we're jumping all of them. And that gives you the fullest degree of step. So now that we're all set with that, we need to know about the A4988 and how to align it. So here is the top of the A4988. And what we need to know are a couple of landmarks on it. Some of them I'll go over in this tutorial, others I'll leave for other tutorials. But over in the upper right hand corner where I'm pointing, you can see the enable pin. That's what we need to know for a landmark. We also have our direction pin, and then we have our ground pin. And just so I can emphasize yet again, if you install this backwards on your board, you will damage your board. So pay very close attention to the alignment. Now, the other things that I need to point out is I have actual heat fins on top of the chip underneath here. And this is our trim pod. This is used to calibrate your stepper. But remember that when this comes from the factory, it's usually pretty well calibrated. And in order for me to show you this, it would be a whole tutorial within itself. So I'm going to skip that for now. Okay, now it's time to actually install the stepper. And as you can see in the upper left-hand corner of the stepper, there's the enable pin over here. And we know that the enable pin lines up with this pin right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this over those ports. We're going to apply a little bit of thumb pressure to put it in place. And then we're going to do the same for the Y stepper in the Y stepper port. And we're going to push it down as well. Now, in order to load the firmware, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do it via a SD or micro SD card. Now, I have one right over here that I'm going to pop out. And I'm going to actually place it in my adapter so I can place it in my computer. And you may hear a beep. Okay, now that we have the SD card in the computer, you can see that it says firmware.curve. That's our current firmware. Note the date and time of this because this will change, meaning that there will be another file in here when we're complete. So what I want to do right now is actually go over to the Marlin download page, which is located at marlinfw.org. And we're on the actual download tab. What we need to do is pull down the latest version of Marlin. So I'm going to click right here and let this download. And while it's downloading, let me know, or I'm going to actually let you know that no one is paying me or sponsoring me to do this tutorial. But I will be placing Amazon affiliate links in the description to make it easier for you to find this product on Amazon. So now that it's downloaded, I'm going to actually go to Show in Folder. I'm going to right click on what we just downloaded and do Extract All, and then click the Extract button. And while this is extracting for the German audience, I thought I'd tell them a little joke about our exchange program at my high school. We had a exchange program called the Brighton Bremen Exchange, spelled B-R-E-M-E-N. And as you know, my last name is Bremen. So In a math class that I used to have, the teacher would talk about Germany for 15 minutes in the exchange program, and she'd always call it Bremen. So I would raise my hand and say, "Can we talk about math?" And apparently she did not like that. So the Germans might get the joke. If not, I'm guessing a lot of other people in Europe may. So now that this is extracted, I'm going to go over to VSCode. Inside VSCode, we're going to be using Platform IO. And if you don't know how to install that, I've included a tutorial in the playlist to explain how to do it. There might actually be two. So I'm going to click on Open Folder. And as you can see, it's in the download folder and it's already pointing to Marlin, but we need to go to the subfolder. Then we need to select the folder. And hopefully this will load for us correctly here, which it looks like it is. So I'm going to click on the Marlin folder, then I'm going to go to the source folder, and then the core folder. I'm going to go inside boards.h for a moment, and what I need to find in here is our actual board, and that will be SKR Pro. And this is the board type that we're using. So I'm going to copy this. And one other thing I want to show, a bunch of people may not know this, is that there's a pins folder here. This outlines what pins are on your board and how they're ordered. So I believe it's in this folder right here. So let's take a look around and see if it's located here. Apparently it may not be, so let's see if I can find it real quick here. So it might be one of these. So it's not that one. So it's probably this one right here. So apparently I'm not finding it very quickly, which is fine. But it is located in one of these folders, and I'm probably scrolling right past it. So it's going to be this name, board_BTT_SKR Pro. And apparently I'm a little bit slow at finding it today, so let's see if I can find it real quick. Here it is. So inside here, you can see that it's actually outlining what pins are used where on the board and what they're for. Like for your steppers over here, these are actual pins for your board. This is very useful if you need to realign pins, because you can actually modify this file and then save it, and your compile should take care of it if you've lined it up correctly. But that's more of an advanced topic, so I'm going to skip it for now. But I'm going to get back to configuration.h. So in configuration.h, I'm going to do a search on motherboard. And what we just copied, we're going to have to paste right here over board_ramps_14_EFB for extruder fan bed. So I'm going to paste it right here. And that sets us up for the correct motherboard. Then I'm going to change the serial port to -1. And the next thing that I need to find is actually our steppers, because we need to enable those. So I'm going to do a Control F, and I'm going to do a search on A4988, which will bring us to the steppers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable some steppers on the board so you can see how to do it. Currently, they're commented out. We're going to remove the comment for the X stepper, for the Y stepper, and then for good practice, we'll do the Z stepper, and we'll do, let's see, E0, E1, and E2. So they're all enabled for a A4988 stepper. Now there's another problem that a lot of people run into, and that's how to calibrate correctly for your steps. So this is very important. It's default access steps per unit. This is what they put in for a default value of 80, 80, 4,000, and 500. And that would be for your X, your Y, your Z, and then E0 or anything that follows thereafter if it's matched correctly for steppers and for NEMA17 motors. So keep this closely at heart because it's going to be kind of important. So I'm going to show you how to actually figure out what your values may be. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to search on RepRap. And we're looking for the calculator. So I'm going to press enter and I'm going to go to RepRap Calculator. Inside RepRap Calculator, it shows you how to calculate certain values. But what we're interested in right now is the X and the Y. And this assumes that you're using a belt-driven system and the default belts. So if we're using a 1/16 stepper like the A4988, this would be our default value if our pulley had 8 teeth and had a pitch of 2 for the belt, otherwise known as a GT2 belt. So if you had a different type of driver like a DRV 8825, you would change the value to 1/32. And then depending upon what other stepper you have, you would double this value until you found or derived what you needed. But seeing how we're using a 1/16 of a step, I'm going to copy the 200 value and I'm going to bring that back over here. And for our X, I'm going to change the 80 to 200 and the Y to 200. That is the assumed correct value for a starting value in this case now. So we've got that configured. What else do we need to configure here? We need to configure our platform io.ini, and that's located down here. So I'm going to click on that for a second. And as you can see, the default chipset right now, or the default environment, is for a Mega 2560. We need to find ours. So I'm going to do a Control F, and I'm going to search on SKR _PRO. And here's our environment. So I'm going to copy this. Then I'm going to page all the way back up. And I'm going to highlight this value and paste over it. And that's what we should use for our default environment. Now, because we cannot upload directly to the board in the current configuration that it's in, we need to compile or build. So I'm going to click the checkbox. Okay, now that it's finished compiling or building, we can check to see if it was successful, which it says it is. So you can see that it has the BigTreeTech SKR Pro right here. In order to load it though, we need to go up to our .pio folder and click on that, then go to build, then go to BigTreeTech SKR Pro, right click on that, and you're going to go to reveal in File Explorer. You're then going to click on the folder, or double click, pardon me, and you're going to go to bin for firmware.bin, and you're going to right click on that, and you're going to say send to SD card. Now that it's been copied over to the SD card, we're going to click over here to verify that it's here. So it's lowercase firmware.bin. And just a little bit of pearl of wisdom, if you need to reload your firmware someday, you can always rename this to that. And that will reload your firmware and then create this by itself. So I'm going to pop out the SD card and then pop it back into the SKR Pro version 1.1. Okay, so now I'm going to pop out the drive right here and I'm going to place it inside the SKR Pro. Now in order to load via the USB, I'm going to need to move this jumper over to the other set of pins. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to connect my SD cable. So I'm going to connect the big side to the SKR Pro and the small side to my computer, and you may hear a beep. And as you can see, the flashing light is showing that it's loading, and that's over in here. Okay, off camera, as you can see, I connected the power for the motors and for the board. Now, it's not connected to the actual power socket yet for 12 volts. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to disconnect the USB for a moment, move the jumper back over, reconnect it, then connect the USB so there's no board power other than the LED over here. And I'm then going to take this over here and plug it into the socket. So the system now will be energized, so you don't want to touch it with your hands. Now, as you can see, everything looks good. So what we want to do next is actually open up Pronterface to test it. So I'm going to go over to my desktop, go to my print run directory, and then open up the executable for Pronterface. Now I'm going to connect to the SKR Pro. As you can see, it says printer is now online. So I'm going to move the X stepper 10 and see what occurs. Now I'm going to move the Y stepper 10 and see what occurs. And as you can see, they seem to be moving in opposite directions, but we can fix that in the firmware by inverting the directions. But let's try 100 for the X stepper, and then 100 for the Y. So if you like my tutorial, please press the like button and subscribe, and thank you for your time.